Let's paint a pink lily with a tropical vibe today. It's a picture I took at my local garden center, and I'm gonna use Arches watercolor paper, 100% cotton, and the dogs are barking, so I'm gonna mute the video. I traced my flower using just a simple carbon copy method and blocked the stamen and the pistil with masking fluid. And when that's dry, I'm starting by wetting all of the petals with some clean water. I'm using a soft brush. This is a Squirrel natural hair Dugato brush. And I'm being very careful to stay within the outline of the petals so the watercolor doesn't travel outside. For the center of the lily, I'm gonna dilute a little bit of lemon yellow and maybe warm it up with some cadmium yellow. Yeah, that looks much nicer. And just outline where I can see yellow on my reference picture. So around the stamens, um, and the water is helping it stay soft and not have some hard edges. Now for the petals themselves, I'm going in with diluted Daniel Smith Quinacridone coral. You see me here testing it on a piece of paper, and I'm just gonna go in still with my natural brush, just drop in color towards the middle of each petal, trying to leave the edges white. And my paper is still damp, so it's allowing me to take my time and work around the flower. I used to work on just regular watercolor from the store, and it was so frustrating. It dried so quickly, the colors didn't flow easily. It was very frustrating. And I couldn't keep myself from using permanent rose. So drop in some diluted Windsor Newton permanent rose here and there just to brighten the petals a little bit. Where I'm losing some white highlights, I am washing my brush and you dab in the excess water on a piece of paper towel and just lift in some of that color, just so I don't lose my highlights. Keep an eye on your petals as you go around. This one started to have a hard edge, so I'm softening it again with just a very damp brush. As the paper dries, it's easier and easier to lift highlights. But it's still damp. I can still take my time working around. I dried the whole flower, and I'm going to use my Scepter Gold brush to allow me to work in some midtones without hard edges. I'm first going to wet one petal at a time, and then I'm going to drop in more concentrated pink mix. So mostly the coral color, add in a little bit of permanent rose here and there. And because the petal is wet, all the little detail I'm adding have this like beautiful little fuzzy spread around them. So nothing harsh. If I see any hard edges starting to form, or if the color is too concentrated, I'm going to use my Scepter gold sable brush with some water to kind of like soften the edges as I'm doing here. Either drag some paint onto the white area or soften the edges. So I'm keeping an eye on my reference photo for where to put those mid-tone values, but I'm also having fun with it. I'm not trying to be 100% exact. So here you see my mark was too dark, so I'm softening it with clean, damp sable brush. That's basically it. I'm gonna repeat this process for each petal, wetting with clean water, drop in some darker or more concentrated pinks, and then softening it with the large brush. You can see how convenient it is to use masking tape. It allows me to not worry about those pistils and stamens, even though you'll see when I'm ready to work on the center. Once you peel it off, it doesn't leave the best, cleanest edges, but there's a way to work around that. So just, I'm continuing to work on building up some values. And then we'll get into letting it dry and then defining the shape a little bit more. All right, our second layer is dry. I let it dry for a little bit and then used my heat gun and just verifying that the paper feels nice and crisp under my hand. I'm gonna start dropping in even darker values a little bit at a time, and instead of using black or the neutral tint, I'm gonna mix a little bit of the green I plan on using for the background with my coral. So my Windsor Newton Hooker's green with the Daniel Smith Quinacridone coral, just a little bit at a time. Don't add too much green, and it's gonna just make the pinks just dark enough to stand out. So I'm using a soft brush to drop in those highlights around the middle of the petal, and then again keep using my large brush to soften the edges. Here I drew a line without paying attention to my reference photo and went, oops, this is not where it's supposed to go. So I just quickly go over it with my wet brush, kind of like make it disappear a little bit, and then correct my mistake. Cotton paper is very forgiving. It really truly is the best. So I'm keeping track of my reference photo. I'm also trying my best to not lose my whites, which I'm so bad about it. I get carried away using the color and I'm like, oh, this pink is so cute. And next thing I know, all the whites is gone. So I'm being extra careful this time. And I'm keeping my reference photo. By the way, I know some people use their iPads or even an extra monitor in front of them. I prefer to print my pictures on roughly the same size as my end painting will be, and I'll just put it in front of me. I like the feel of the paper. I like to be able to point to it or put it next to my painting. It gives me a better understanding of what colors to pick. Sometimes on an iPad or monitor, it's not very apparent. I'm working on the shadow from the stamens and pistils, using a little bit more green into my pink mix. And then this petal in the lower left, I'm gonna darken a little bit more because it is kind of like behind and in the shadow more. And as I'm doing that, you'll see how it starts to define the petals that are on top of it. And just for some tiny bit of texture, I'm gonna sprinkle tiny drops of water on top of that petal. So before I continue defining the petals, I'm gonna paint the background, which is my favorite part. Using some very concentrated hooker's green and some concentrated blue. I think in this case I used the Windsor Newton Ultramarine, even a little bit of cerulean into the mix. And I'm gonna keep the two colors separate on my palette as well so I can drop in some additional interesting details. I'm painting it very concentrated because, you know, watercolor dries lighter and I don't want to lose that rich background. I wet sections at a time so I'm not overwhelmed, and then I drop in rather than paint my mix. Once the background is done, it will give me a better idea of how dark I need to go for the rest of my details on the flower itself. So obviously at this point, I am no longer following the reference photo. In general, I will try and keep the background darker towards the bottom of the page and then lighter towards the top. Here I'm dropping some pure Winsor Newton sap green for a little bit of pop of color. And just play with it, just have fun. Backgrounds are the most fun. Another great use of painting a dark background is it helps you or allows you to clean up your petal edges. You'll see me sometimes go in with a smaller brush and correct the petal. I dropped some blue in here. It's very watery, so I'm gonna move it around slightly, and if the puddle forms, I will pick it up with either a clean brush or a bit of tissue paper. See here, that formed a weird angle, so with a smaller brush, I'm gonna correct the shape to make sure the petal goes in the correct direction. A wet background like this, it makes me grateful that I used the block paper. Um, it can absorb a lot of water, it doesn't buckle. I don't have to worry about the paint bleeding onto the next pages and contaminating the rest of my sheets. It is the best. So now I'm gonna repeat this for each of my sections. I'm dropping blue towards what I imagine would be the sky higher on the page, and then my dark green blue mix towards the bottom, and then I'll drop in some lighter colors for interest like sap green. This is almost like creating a water balloon, but instead of using clear water, I like to use a very diluted green. Okay, and this is another mistake that I do all the time. I don't mix enough color. I'm being stingy. Uh, but to mimic having a leaf that curls on top of the lily, I used a little bit of the hooker's green and the sap green to give that movement. And I'm dropping more blue mix towards the top. And just, I'm gonna try and ensure that I have a continuation of the colors on the other side. This is a big section, so I'm wetting it very carefully, making sure not to wet the petal itself. Again, did not mix enough colors, but here we go. So starting with some sap green again to try and indicate maybe some leaves shooting behind the flower, a little bit more blue, and this whole time I'm looking at my petals, and if any edge is rough, I use my dark colors to make it cleaner. And with everything wet, it allows you to move things a little bit more and have the colors mixed on paper. And for some fun mini texture, I sprinkled tiny bits of water. Let's get ready for even darker tones. And first, I'm gonna remove the masking tape. I'm using an eraser. I probably don't have the correct eraser for this, but I'm just going carefully removing the masking tape, trying not to leave smudges with my fingers. And then I'm gonna start dropping dark colors between the petals to kind of like separate them. So this is pushing that petal behind, putting some darks and softening the edges. And that's basically what I'm gonna do around the flower. Dropping and softening. It's another advantage of working on a block. I can very easily turn my painting around for what's convenient for me. It's not taped to the table, it's not taped on a big clunky board. I'm just going to continue to identify my petals and separate them and add in a little bit of detail here and there. All right, let's show the center of the flower some love. So all this nice white paper that we saved using the masking tape, I'm gonna go in with the lemon yellow and cadmium yellow that I used earlier and add in some sap green to start filling in those shapes. So start light and add some shadows. Add in violet to the lemon yellow will create a nice shadow. It's the complementary color. So again, we're going for soft. We're not going for anything dramatic. Just identify those. I honestly don't know what the botanical name is for those little sections, but I'm working down the pistils, and as you can see, the masking tape left a really rugged edge. It's not very straight. So later on, when I'm done with the green painting, I'm gonna go back with some pink and straighten those edges. Anywhere I see the shadow, I go in with the violet and lemon yellow mix. I use that same shadow color with a semi-dry brush to darken that little section over there. So dry brushing is very effective on hot press paper because it has all those bumps. Ensure the brush is not wet too much. Pick up a little bit of color, dab it on some tissue paper, and then lightly go over the paper. And all those little bumps, they will catch the color. Now for the orange color, I'll mix my coral with some cadmium yellow and not use orange from the tube. I'll drop that mixture at the bottom of the shape. And then with another brush that has clean water, I will soften that edge. So just using clear, I'm using two brushes actually, one that has the color and one that's clean, slightly damp to expand the mixture. Just in an effort to end up with a gradient, a dark orange and a lighter orange on one side. It's not always successful, but it is so soothing to work on these details. Sometimes I'm not sure which I prefer the most. The initial washes who have so much freedom, just dropping colors and watching them bloom and watching the water do all the work. Or all these little details where I spend minutes and minutes, if not hours, going over each tiny little shape. So I vary the intensity of my mix just for some interest. Add in more coral or more yellow from one shape to the other. And then that tiny bit of shadow we dropped earlier can come through because watercolor is transparent. So very magical. Every tutorial I watch, all those artists have the same advice. Don't paint everything. I mean, unless we're doing like 100% pure botanical painting, but our imagination can fill in the rest. Just give the illusion of an object, and then our mind can fill in the blank. So my hand is resting on a tissue paper. Even though I did dry the painting, I don't trust myself. I have been known to drop dark colors, and I'm also not very careful where I keep my palette. Sometimes I have them on the right, sometimes on the left, sometimes on the top. Um, so it's better to have a lot of clean tissue papers at hand to correct those tiny mistakes. Now comes the fussing stage, is which I believe I mentioned it earlier, that masking fluid left some weird bumpy edges. So I'm going in with a tiny, tiny brush. So I believe the brush I'm using right now is a Princeton Aqua Elite number 3. It's a rounded brush with a fine tip and with some of my original pink mix, and I'm going around those long stamens and pistil and just cleaning the yellows. Trying to define some more petals. It's fussing. It's a lot of fussing. So I'm going in with tiny brush work because I do not want to overwork any portion. And this is going to take me a while. So you can skip this stage, or I'm going to put in some music and you can enjoy. This process for me is very therapeutical. I am so happy. I am in the zone, and forget everything. I decided I wanted the petal centers to be even darker, more vibrant. So I'm going with more concentrated pink and coral color and just adding some accents here and there. If the edge is too harsh, I will soften it with water. I'm not looking for any brush mark that will appear out of place. I was gonna paint wet on dry, but then I decided to slightly wet the petal in the center, just a little bit of water. That way my brush mark won't be too harsh and I won't need to soften it. I was just testing. Yep, Looks good. I'm gonna use the same technique to drop in some of those pink dots on this petal. I didn't add too much water, so my little dots of paint are not spreading like crazy, but they're getting the fuzzy little circle around them. The same thing for those two large petals. Drop in some pink concentrated colors. Now here I thought it would be fun if I could paint some veins. I don't want veins on all of them, just in a small section for some visual interest. So my tiny brush, my Princeton brush with some pink color and lightly touching the paper and varying my strokes. Pretty. Any brush stroke that I don't like, very easily fixed with just a damp brush. And I think with this last detail, I'm happy with this painting. Let me know if you like these long tutorials and if you had fun watching this. Thank you.